At 6:42 a.m., I checked my bank account and saw that $320,000 were gone. At 6:47, I received a text message from my daughter. Consider the house sold. No good morning, no explanation, no remorse. Just that. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, the tea I'd just poured cooling untouched beside me. I kept rereading the message, as if staring long enough would change the words, or the meaning behind them. I'd trusted her. That was the cruelest part. 6 months ago, I gave her financial power of attorney. Just in case something happens, she'd said, wrapping her hand around mine like it was still something tender. I was recovering from a fall back then, and it all made sense. It always does. Until it doesn't. The house in question, the one she had now apparently sold, wasn't just some property. It was my house. The one Walter and I bought in 1972 when it still smelled of fresh paint and dry plaster. Where we raised our sons, then our daughter. Where he died, quietly, in the same bedroom we once shared. The house was paid off, kept up, and appraised generously in the last valuation. It had been my security blanket, my one tangible link to everything we built. And now, with one text, she had the audacity to erase it, as if it were hers to erase. The numbers didn't lie. The money from the house sale had hit my account briefly and just as quickly disappeared. Outflows marked transfer to joint account, CJ. CJ, Katherine Johnson, my daughter. I don't remember standing. I just remember the cold of the kitchen tile under my feet and my body moving almost on instinct to the drawer where I kept my records. I was thorough, always have been. Notebooks, printed statements, legal letters. I opened the file labeled Estate Legal and saw the notarized paper with her signature and mine. Power of attorney. Durable. Full. She'd waited. Waited until I was back to walking again, smiling again. Waited until I stopped paying attention. Then she moved. I picked up my phone again and stared at that text. Consider the house sold. The nerve. There was no, "Are you okay?" No, I had to do this because just a decision. A dismissal. The kettle whistled again. I didn't move. In the next room, the morning news played on low volume. Something about a tropical storm brewing off the Gulf. Something about rising prices. I sat down and listened to none of it. Instead, I reached for a pen and started writing down the names of people I needed to call. Not to beg, not to plead, just to begin. Katherine was born in the autumn of 1976, when the leaves in Clarksville turned the color of burnt sugar, and the air smelled like wood smoke and baby powder. She was my third child and my only daughter, and from the beginning, she was different, sharper, more watchful. By the time she was 5, she could mimic my tone better than her brothers could tie their shoes. When she was 10, she called my pork roast predictable. I laughed then. I didn't laugh now. She always had a way of getting what she wanted. With teachers, with friends, with her father. Walter called it charm. I called it something else, though I never dared name it aloud. When Walter passed, it was Katherine who took over the decisions. Not formally, no. My name was still on every paper that mattered. But emotionally, she positioned herself as the voice of reason. "Mom, let's talk about your assets. You shouldn't have to worry about taxes at your age. What if something happened to you? What then?" And it made sense. It always makes sense when it's wrapped in care. I remembered the afternoon she brought the lawyer to the house. "A friend from church," she said. He wore a soft gray suit and carried a folder of papers. They explained it all slowly, gently, as if I were already fading. "It's just a precaution," the man said. "This will help Catherine act on your behalf if there's ever an emergency." I signed, with my favorite pen, no less, and 6 months later, here I was. No emergency, no discussion, just a vanished house and a vanished sum of money, all under the authority I handed her myself. I called the bank next. It took 2 minutes and 3 security questions before I was speaking to a real person. "Yes, Mrs. Johnson, I see the transaction. It was executed under a joint authorization tied to the POA document on file." I asked for details. The voice on the line shifted, polite but hesitant. "Funds were wired to an external account ending in €945. Same surname." "Of course. Would you like to place a freeze on your accounts?" "Yes," I said, "and I'd like the POA revoked. Immediately." The woman paused. "To revoke it formally, you'll need to submit a notarized document. But I can flag your accounts right now, pending further action." "Do that." I hung up and sat still for a moment, letting the quiet swallow me whole. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere down the block, a car door slammed. The world was going on, unaware that mine had shifted overnight. I opened the second drawer of the desk and took out a thick manila envelope labeled Legal Originals. I kept everything. Walter used to tease me about it. "You'd keep the water bill from 1982 if it had your name spelled right." Maybe I would. Inside the envelope, folded neatly, was the contact information for a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in 7 years. Glenn Hartford. He handled Walter's will and the trust we never ended up using. A meticulous man, quiet but thorough. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times before a young voice answered. "Hartford and Price, this is Lisa. I need to speak with Mr. Hartford. It's urgent. Tell him Helen Johnson is calling." A pause. "Let me check if he's available. 1 moment, please." While I waited, I noticed the framed photo near the phone. Catherine, age 12, holding a spelling bee trophy, standing between her 2 older brothers. I remembered that day. She won by spelling duplicity. The irony did not escape me. A click on the line. "Helen?" Glenn's voice was older, raspier than I remembered, but still steady. "Well, I'll be damned. It's been a while." "Yes," I said. "I'm afraid this isn't a social call." "I figured. What's happened?" And so I told him. Not every detail, not yet. But enough. The money, the house, the text, the need to reclaim what little ground I still stood on. He was quiet for a beat. Then, "Come in this afternoon, 2 o'clock. Bring everything." I agreed, thanked him, and hung up. By noon, I had assembled every document I thought might matter. Deeds, statements, the original POA. I packed them in my old leather tote, the one Walter bought me when I turned 50. It still smelled like cedar and habit. I changed clothes, brushed my hair, and looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection didn't look angry. It looked clear. The law office hadn't changed. Same brass doorknobs, same cracked leather chairs in the waiting room, same clock on the wall that ticked half a second too slow. I'd sat here before, the day we finalized Walter's estate, with my hands folded in my lap and a manila folder under one arm, just like today. Glenn Hartford came out himself to greet me. He'd filled out some in the face and moved slower than I remembered, but his handshake was steady and his eyes still sharp behind thick glasses. "Let's go to my office," he said, and I followed him down the hallway, lined with framed certificates and dusty bookshelves. Once inside, I placed the tote on his desk and pulled out the file. He waited until I was seated before opening it. I told him everything. No dramatic flair, no trembling voice, just the facts. What I'd seen, what I'd signed, what I'd lost. I even showed him the text. He read it, eyebrows rising only slightly. "That's cold," he muttered. "I raised her better than that," I replied. He looked at me, long and searching. "I believe you." For the next 20 minutes, Glenn went through the paperwork, laying each page carefully on his desk, reviewing it with the quiet precision of someone who'd done this his entire life. When he finished, he sat back in his chair and folded his hands. "You've got a problem, Helen," he said plainly, "but it's not hopeless." "I didn't think it was," I said. "I just needed to hear it." He explained that although Catherine had the legal right to act on my behalf under the power of attorney, it didn't mean she had the right to act against my interests. She'd need to prove that selling the house was in your best interest, not hers, not convenient, beneficial to you. That's a high bar. "Can we get the money back?" "Maybe," he said, "depending on how fast she's moved it. But we'll have to act quickly. I'll file an emergency petition to suspend the POA, freeze any accessible funds, and request a court review." He looked me in the eye. "You'll need to be ready to testify if it comes to that." I nodded. "I am." "And the house?" He sighed. "If it's been sold and transferred, that's a tougher knot. But if she didn't disclose that it was under a POA or failed to notify you properly, there may be recourse." I thought of the front door, the chimes that still rang when you opened it, the small scuff on the kitchen tile where Walter dropped the coffee pot in '89. I didn't want it back to live in it. I wanted it back because it was mine. She didn't even call Glenn, not once. That may help you more than you think. We discussed next steps. He gave me a list of documents to request from the bank, drafted a letter to notify Catherine that the POA was under legal review, and arranged for me to sign a formal revocation the following day. As I stood to leave, he touched my arm gently. "I've seen plenty of ugly family stories, Helen, but this one..." He stopped himself. "Let's just say I'm glad you're fighting back." "I waited too long," I said. "But I'm here now." Outside, the sun had started to set, casting long shadows over the sidewalk. I walked slowly to my car, not because of my knees, though they ached always, but because I needed a minute to breathe. I sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, and thought about Catherine. There would be a response. She wouldn't go quiet. She never had. But this time, neither would I. I didn't hear from Catherine that night. No calls, no texts, no apologies. Just silence, which meant she knew. By morning, the first email came. Not from her, of course, but from a name I didn't recognize. Olivia Beale, attorney at law. The tone was predictable, polite but defensive. Our client, Ms. Catherine Johnson, acted within the authority granted to her. And so on. I read it once, then again, then closed it without replying. I'd already sent Glenn everything. But what caught me off guard wasn't the legal talk. It was the email signature. Representing Catherine Johnson and Charles Johnson. Charles, her husband, my son-in-law. The one who never looked me in the eye when he talked about money. The one who always said, "Well, if it's okay with your daughter," when they needed something. He was in on it too. Not just an accomplice, a beneficiary. My stomach turned, but I kept my face calm as I clicked open my online banking again. The numbers hadn't changed. No new withdrawals, no returned funds. The $320,000 was still gone, funneled away in a morning as if I'd simply misplaced it. At 10:12 a.m., I called the financial advisor Catherine had pushed on me last year, a polished man named Bryce who once gave me a Christmas basket filled with dried apricots and expensive crackers. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Johnson, so good to hear from you. I hope everything is—" "I need a list of every transaction Catherine has initiated through your office since March," I interrupted. There was a pause. "Well, I'd have to check what I'm authorized to share under the POA agreement." "It's been revoked," I said. "You'll be getting notice of that shortly. In the meantime, I'm requesting the records, as the account holder." He cleared his throat. "Let me speak to legal and get back to you." "You do that." I hung up before he could stall further. Then I picked up the landline and called the bank again, this time asking for the fraud department. I wasn't reporting fraud, not exactly, but I wanted everything documented. Everything Catherine touched, signed, transferred. Every login, every withdrawal. "I want the names," I told the woman on the line. "The devices, the IP addresses. I don't care how small." She promised a report would be generated. By noon, I was sitting at my kitchen table, papers spread out like a battlefield map. Statements, emails, property records, even old tax returns. I wasn't looking for more betrayal. I'd found enough of that. I was looking for the pattern. And it was there. Quiet transfers. A property line I didn't remember approving. My name on a joint title for a condo I'd never seen. All signs of a long game. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. A knock at the door pulled me out of the fog. I opened it to see my neighbor, Rosa, 83, brisk as ever, holding a container of soup. "You looked tired yesterday," she said. "So I brought you lentils. They fix everything." I took the container with a small laugh. "Thank you, Rosa." "You didn't have to." She waved me off. "I saw your daughter here last week. Didn't look happy." "Neither was I said quietly. She narrowed her eyes. "She's still trying to run your life?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Rosa sighed. "You know what my mother used to say? If they count your steps, stop walking in their direction." I smiled. "That's good advice. You need anything, I'm next door. And I mean anything. You hear me?" "I hear you." After she left, I sat down again at the table. The betrayal stung. It always would. But I wasn't falling apart. Not this time. I had the records. I had the lawyer. I had the truth. And soon, I would have my voice back. The receptionist at Glenn's office handed me a clipboard with the revocation documents already prepared. "Take your time," she said, but I didn't need time. I read every line, not because I doubted Glenn, but because I needed to see it in writing, that this time I was the one making the decisions. I signed in firm, deliberate strokes. My signature was slower now, but it hadn't lost its weight. When Glenn came out to meet me, he glanced at the paperwork and nodded. "It's official," he said. "As of now, Catherine has no legal authority to act on your behalf." I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt a deep, aching grief. Not just for the money or the house, but for the quiet trust that had slipped through my fingers without me noticing. It wasn't just gone, it had been taken. We went over the next steps. Emergency motions were filed. A judge had already signed a temporary injunction, blocking further use of any remaining funds until the court hearing in 2 weeks. Glenn had also requested a forensic review of all financial activity tied to Catherine since the POA was enacted. He handed me a printed email, a response from Catherine's attorney. She'd called the sale of the house a strategic decision to ensure Mrs. Johnson's financial stability. I laughed, loud and bitter, in Glenn's quiet office. Strategic for who? I asked. Glenn didn't answer. He didn't need to. As I gathered my things, he said, "I need you to be prepared, Helen. This won't be a clean fight. They'll try to turn this into a misunderstanding. Say you were confused or ill. Maybe even frame it as an act of love." I looked him straight in the eye. They've already made it an act of war. Back home, the house felt smaller, not because of the space, but because of the silence. Catherine used to call every Sunday. Even when it became performative, it was something. I kept expecting the phone to ring. It didn't. At 4 p.m, I opened the drawer where I kept my letters. Real letters. Written by hand, not typed or tapped. I pulled out one from Catherine, dated 2003. She was in college then, thanking me for paying her tuition. "You always believe in me," she'd written, "even when I mess up. I promise I'll make you proud." I folded the letter back into its envelope and returned it to the drawer. It wasn't nostalgia I felt. It was proof. At 5:30, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Emma, my granddaughter, Catherine's daughter. 18, tall and serious-faced like her father. Her voice trembled slightly. "Grandma," she said, "I didn't know where else to go." I stepped aside and let her in. She walked straight to the kitchen table, her eyes scanning the papers still spread across it. She didn't ask questions. She already knew. She sat down slowly and folded her hands in her lap. "Mom told me you were confused," she said quietly. "She said you asked her to help sell the house, that you were afraid of the upkeep, the stairs, the yard." "And you believed her?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "No. I just didn't know what to do with the truth." I poured her tea. She didn't drink it. "I saw the account statements, Grandma. I wasn't supposed to. I was looking for something on her computer, and I saw the transfers. The wire amounts. One to an escrow company in Arizona. One to a brokerage I've never heard of." I said nothing. Let her speak. "She and Dad? They're buying a second property. Not for you. For themselves." She said it's an investment, but I heard her on the phone yesterday. She said, "Once the rest clears, we can close the Tahoe place by next Friday." Emma looked up at me then, her eyes wet. "I don't want to be part of this. I'm not asking for anything. I'm sorry." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I know you're not them," I said. "And I know you didn't ask for this." She stayed a while. Told me about school. About her part-time job at the cafe. About a boy named Milo who writes terrible poetry but makes her laugh. When she finally left, I watched her walk down the driveway, back straight, head low. And I felt, for the first time since this began, something close to hope. Because someone in this family still knew the difference between right and wrong. By sunrise the next morning, my inbox held 3 new messages. The first was from the bank's security department. Request for account access via mobile device denied, flagged as unauthorized. The second was from Bryce, the financial advisor. "Mrs. Johnson, I've been informed of the change in power of attorney. I've suspended all pending activity until further notice. Please contact me directly for future instructions." And the third was from Catherine herself. No subject line, no greeting. "We need to talk. This is not the way to handle things." I stared at it for a long while. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I understand." Just control. Still trying to grasp the reins, even now. I didn't reply. Instead, I got dressed and drove to the courthouse, where Glenn had arranged for me to sign the final motion in person. The clerk greeted me like I was just another elderly woman with too much paper in her hands. I signed in silence. No one asked me how it felt to drag your own daughter into court. Maybe that was for the best. I wouldn't have had a clean answer. Outside, the morning light was pale and sharp, the kind that cuts through cloud cover and shows every crack in the sidewalk. I walked slower than usual, but not because I was tired. I was thinking. When I got home, the phone was ringing. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another text arrived. "I'm coming by the house. We need to clear the air." No, you're not, I thought. 5 minutes later, her silver SUV pulled up in front of the house. Same one I helped finance back when she had her second baby and said they were drowning in daycare bills. I watched from behind the curtain as she sat in the car, staring at the front door. Her hands gripped the wheel. She didn't move. She stayed there for nearly 10 minutes. Then she drove away, not brave enough to knock. By evening, the rest of the documents from the bank arrived. Pages of transaction logs, flagged notes, internal reviews. Catherine had transferred money to 5 different accounts over 3 months. All under my name. Most of it tied to shell companies or trust funds she hadn't disclosed. And all of it, now frozen. She must have thought I'd never look, that I'd be grateful for whatever crumbs she fed me, that I'd forget what belonging felt like and settle for safety. That's what happens when people think time has made you fragile. They mistake your silence for submission. That night, Emma texted me again, just a simple line. "I'm thinking of you." I wrote back, "I'm okay. I just needed to remember who I am." Because that's the truth, isn't it? You don't just lose control all at once. It happens by inches. You hand over one decision, then another, then one more, because it's easier, until one day you wake up and your name is just ink on someone else's paper. But not anymore. The next morning, I drove to the county records office and requested a property title search on my name. I wanted to see what else they'd tried to leverage. What other stones had been moved while I wasn't looking. The clerk, a kind woman in her 50s, printed the records without fuss. There was the house, marked as sold by POA. There was the joint condo title in Phoenix. And then, a second mortgage application on my former home. Filed the same day the sale closed. Signed, submitted, approved. All before I even knew it was gone. It wasn't carelessness. It wasn't a single mistake. It was a plan. Every document I read made it clearer. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been erased. And as I sat in the back corner of that public office with the sunlight slanting across the laminate floor, I felt it again. Not rage, not panic. Resolve. I wasn't fighting to win her back. I was fighting to reclaim myself. The first time Catherine ever lied to me, she was 6. She'd broken a ceramic teapot I'd inherited from my mother, then blamed it on her oldest brother. I knew it was her. The guilt was written all over her face. But I let it go. Told myself it was harmless, that children test boundaries, that truth would come in time. It didn't. It just got cleverer. That memory floated into my mind as I sat across from Glenn again, 2 days after the injunction was filed. He'd spread out the financial documents I'd collected, the bank logs, property filings, trust declarations, wire transfers. "She's thorough," he said. "I'll give her that." "She's deliberate," I corrected. "There's a difference." He tapped a sheet of paper. "This account here, a holding firm called Vantage Rise LLC. It's not just a shell. It's active. Looks like she's using it to move money between investments. High risk, high yield." With my name behind it, I said. Exactly. I sat back in the chair. The weight of it all was enormous, but I refused to let it crush me. I want it all reversed, Glenn. Every last cent she moved in my name. I don't care how long it takes. You'll have it, he said. But Helen, this is going to get uglier before it gets better. I nodded. Let it. That afternoon, I received a registered letter, one of those heavy envelopes that carries the weight of something someone doesn't have the nerve to say aloud. Inside was a statement from Catherine's attorney. It was titled, plainly, Intent to Challenge Revocation of Power of Attorney. The pages that followed were a mix of polished legalese and soft insinuations. That I had demonstrated cognitive inconsistencies, that Catherine had acted at all times with her mother's well-being in mind, that any reversal would cause irreparable disruption to carefully arranged financial safeguards. I laughed when I read that last line. She wasn't even pretending anymore. This wasn't about confusion or miscommunication. It was a shot across the bow. They wanted to scare me into silence. It didn't work. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed the number printed at the bottom of the letter. Beale and Hartley, this is Renee, came the voice on the other end. This is Helen Johnson, I said calmly. I've received your letter regarding my daughter's objection to the revocation. Kindly inform Ms. Beale that the only thing irreparably disrupted here is my tolerance for being stolen from. A pause. Would you like to schedule a call with Ms. Beale directly? No, I said. She can speak with my attorney. I hung up. That evening, as the wind picked up outside and the shutters rattled like restless bones, I took out a second folder I hadn't opened in years, my estate binder. Walter and I started it back in 2001 when he had his first health scare. We filled it slowly over the years, wills, insurance, pension details. I'd updated it after he died but hadn't looked at it closely since. Now, I read through every page. Not because I planned on dying anytime soon, quite the opposite, but because, for the first time in a long time, I understood that planning to live also meant planning for after. I flipped past the old will, the one that left everything equally to the children, and stopped when I saw Emma's name. It appeared once. A mention of a savings bond. That would change. She was the only one who hadn't turned away. The only one who came not to explain or defend, but to listen. That night, I called Glenn again. I want to change my will, I told him, and I want to establish a trust. Separate, protected, irrevocable. Name the beneficiary? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Emma Johnson. We arranged to meet the next day. After the call, I sat by the window for a while, watching the porch light flicker across the empty street. No apology had come. No knock at the door. Just silence. But that was fine. Sometimes, silence is just another kind of answer. The kitchen faucet had started leaking again. It was a quiet, rhythmic drip. Soft enough to ignore if I closed the door, but steady enough to get under my skin if I didn't. Walter used to fix things like that before they became problems. He'd lay a towel on the counter, spread out his tools like a surgeon, and hum quietly as he worked. He's been gone 13 years. I've gotten used to hiring strangers. That morning, I called a plumber. A young man arrived an hour later, polite, competent, and done within 20 minutes. As he was packing up, he paused by the doorway. You live here alone, ma'am? I nodded. He hesitated. It's a nice house. Doesn't look like it's changed hands in decades. It hasn't, I said. Not willingly. He gave me a puzzled look, but didn't ask. I paid him in cash and closed the door behind him. Funny how it's the little things. A leak, a familiar voice on the radio, the smell of floor polish, that make a house feel more like yours than any title deed ever could. I walked through the rooms slowly, letting my fingers trail along the furniture. Everything I owned had a story. The old writing desk in the living room had been my grandfather's. The china cabinet came from a thrift shop Walter found on a rainy afternoon in '88. Even the rug by the front door, frayed at the edges, faded in the middle, had seen more than most people ever would. That's what Catherine didn't understand. She saw this house as a box, 4 walls with equity. She'd never once looked at the way the afternoon light hit the staircase, or how the air changed after baking bread. She didn't just take my home. She dismissed its memory. At noon, Emma stopped by again. She knocked gently, holding a bag from the cafe where she worked. "Figured you hadn't eaten," she said, handing me a croissant and a lukewarm latte. We sat in the kitchen, the faucet now mercifully silent. She watched me for a long moment before speaking. "Mom's angry," she said finally. "Really angry." I stirred my coffee. "Angry that I stopped her, or that I noticed?" "Both." She hesitated. "She told Dad you were being manipulated, that some lawyer had filled your head with paranoia." I smiled without humor. "It's strange how the people who manipulate you always assume you're the one being misled. She also said you're unstable." I turned my head sharply, but Emma looked away, ashamed even to repeat it. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I know it's not true." I reached across the table and touched her hand. "I'm not angry at you, darling. You're just the messenger." She exhaled. I told her I didn't believe it, and that if she wanted to talk about you like that, she'd have to do it without me in the room. That made my throat tighten. I never wanted Emma to choose sides. But maybe it wasn't about sides. Maybe it was just about choosing decency. After she left, I sat with that phrase, unstable, echoing in my head. That's how it always begins, isn't it? Dismissal cloaked as concern, doubt disguised as care. She's tired. She's confused. She's not what she used to be. As if age itself were an indictment. They say time humbles you. And it does, in ways you can't imagine when you're young. You lose names, grip strength, the sharpness of sight. But time also clarifies. It scrapes away the fluff. You see people for who they really are, who always needed something, who never looked back, who only called when the check was late. And who, even when it cost them nothing, still chose not to love you. I remembered how Catherine used to ask me what I wanted for my birthday, then buy something else entirely. "This felt more you," she'd say, like my own voice didn't matter. Maybe it never had. That night, I made soup, just for myself. No extra portions. No leftovers in Tupperware for the kids. Just one bowl, one spoon, one woman at the table. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt entire. The call came just after 8 p.m. Not from Catherine, from Charles. He hadn't called me in years. Even when Walter died, he sent flowers instead of showing up. "Tied up at work," he said back then. Always the polite deflections, the smooth deferrals. Catherine liked to pretend he wasn't involved in the finances, that she ran the ship and he just smiled from the deck. But I always knew better. I let it ring once, twice. Then answered. "Charles," I said, flat. "Helen." His voice was too bright, too careful. "I thought we could talk. Just you and me." "Is that so?" A pause. "Catherine's upset. She feels blindsided. You two have always had such a close bond." I didn't reply. He cleared his throat. She's worried this legal path you've taken might permanently damage the family. There it was. The subtle guilt draped in diplomacy. Charles, I said slowly, did you know the house was sold before I did? The silence on the line was answer enough. I signed the authorization, he admitted finally. But I thought you'd approved it. Catherine said, don't finish that sentence, I interrupted. You knew what you were signing. You always know. You just never want to be the one holding the matches when the fire starts. I didn't mean to upset you. But you didn't mean not to either. He sighed, long and theatrical. Look, we can still fix this. Maybe we all got carried away. But lawyers, courts, this doesn't have to get uglier than it already is. I let him talk. Sometimes silence is more powerful than shouting. I mean, he continued, you are getting older. The stress alone. There it was again. That sly little jab. The quiet way they bury you alive. Charles, I said, I've buried a husband. I've raised 3 children. I've run a household, paid your debts, and spent more nights alone than you've spent doing anything decent. Don't talk to me about stress. He said nothing. I ended the call. The next morning, the mail brought 2 envelopes. The first was from the county. Confirmation that the temporary injunction had been upheld. Catherine's access to any of my financial accounts was now legally severed pending court review. If she tried to move a penny, it would trigger a violation. The second envelope was handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, in Catherine's handwriting. It read, I don't know why you're doing this, but you're hurting everyone, especially Emma. That last part made my jaw tighten. They always circle back to the one thing that still matters to you, hoping you'll fold. I didn't. I placed the note in a drawer, not because I needed to keep it, but because one day I wanted to be able to show Emma how manipulation really sounds when it dresses itself as love. By late afternoon, I had an appointment with Glenn to sign the new will and trust. His assistant greeted me with quiet warmth. Would you like a glass of water, Mrs. Johnson? No, thank you, I said. I'm not staying long. In Glenn's office, the documents were already laid out in a neat stack. The new will, the trust papers, Emma's name clearly printed as the primary beneficiary. She'll be protected, Glenn said. This structure is ironclad. They can't touch it. I nodded and signed. When it was done, he looked at me and asked, Do you want to notify Catherine? Or would you rather I handle that? Let them find out the way I found out about the house, I said. Through paperwork. He smiled, not with amusement, but with a quiet kind of respect. You're not just fighting back, he said. You're taking it back. I stood to leave. That's the idea. At home, I passed the photo shelf in the hallway. Old pictures, frozen moments, a birthday party in '89, a Thanksgiving table in 2005. Catherine, age 16, cutting the turkey with awkward pride. Charles holding the carving knife like it was a trophy. I looked at them for a long time. Then I picked up one of the frames and set it face down. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Sometimes the past doesn't need erasing. It just needs to stop watching you from the wall. The last time I felt this steady, Walter was still alive. It was a Wednesday in late spring. I'd baked a peach cobbler that came out just right, golden, bubbling at the edges. Walter came in from the garden, his hands smelling of soil and thyme, kissed me on the cheek and said, You know we're going to be fine, even if no one ever thanks us. That's the line I held on to now, not because it made me feel better, but because it reminded me I'd always known this day might come. The day when giving wasn't enough, when patience was seen as weakness, when silence became permission. No more. That afternoon, I called Emma. She answered on the first ring. "Grandma? Are you free?" "Yes." "What's going on?" "I need a witness." A pause. "For what?" "You'll see." We met at a small notary office near downtown, tucked between a florist and an abandoned post office. Emma arrived breathless, still in her cafe apron. I handed her the documents, a notarized copy of the new will, the trust agreement, and a signed letter removing Catherine from every emergency contact, executor, and advisory position tied to my name. Emma read each page slowly, her eyes widening. "You're really doing this," she whispered. "I already did it," I said. "I just wanted someone in the room who would remember." The notary stamped and signed the papers, while Emma watched in silence. When it was over, I folded the copies neatly and placed them in a manila envelope labeled "Final." As we walked out, she looked at me, worried. "Is this what you want?" "I mean, it's what I need," I said. "There's a difference." We sat in her car with the windows down, letting the breeze drift through. "She's going to lose it," Emma said quietly. "She already did," I replied. That evening, I received 3 more calls, all from blocked numbers. I didn't answer. They didn't leave messages. At 9:07 p.m., a new number texted me. "Congratulations, you've officially ruined your own family." No name, no punctuation, but the voice was unmistakable. I deleted it without responding. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Not even afraid. Just finished. Finished with the games, the justifications, the forced apologies. Finished pretending this was salvageable. Some things aren't meant to be mended. Some things are just meant to be ended. Later that night, I pulled out my old photo album, the leather-bound one with worn corners and pages that smelled like time. I flipped past the familiar shots. Birthdays, camping trips, graduations. Catherine in braces. Charles in sunglasses. Emma, a baby, curled against my chest. Then I found the page I was looking for. A photograph from 1983. Walter and I in front of the house. The very one Catherine sold. We were younger, tired, maybe. But we were proud. We'd just finished repainting the shutters. I was holding a brush. He was grinning, sweaty and covered in specks of white. Behind us, the porch glowed in the sun. Ours. I traced my fingers over the image and whispered to the room, "It mattered." Because it did. Because even if they stripped away the deed and siphoned the money and buried the paper trail under 100 lies, it still happened. We built something. We loved something. And that can't be undone. Not by greed. Not by lawyers. Not by a daughter who lost her way. The panic came swiftly once they realized I wasn't bluffing. It started with a voicemail from Catherine, her voice high and tight, straining for calm. "Mom, can we please talk? I don't know what Glenn is telling you, but this isn't how families handle things. It's gotten out of hand. Just call me. Please." I didn't. The next day, my bank manager left a message too. Apparently, Charles had attempted to access one of the frozen accounts using an old digital login. The system flagged it immediately and locked them out. "We've documented the attempt, Mrs. Johnson. Would you like us to escalate?" "Yes," I said. By noon, Glenn had filed a formal violation notice. Charles's little experiment would now be part of the court record, along with every other accidental oversight they'd hoped I wouldn't notice. They were unraveling, and they knew it. At 3:45 p.m., the doorbell rang. I didn't need to check the window. I already knew. Catherine. I opened the door slowly. She stood there in oversized sunglasses and a scarf around her neck, like she thought she could disguise disgrace. Her expression flickered between contrition and calculation. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice low. "No," I said. She blinked. "Mom." I said no. She glanced over her shoulder at the street. "We need to talk. Privately." "There's nothing left to talk about. You made your position clear. You're blowing this out of proportion." That made me laugh. Not loud, not sharp, but cold. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, keeping her on the porch where the neighbors could see. I'd learned by now. People like Catherine don't like an audience. "You stole from me," I said quietly. "That's not a misunderstanding. That's not confusion. That's theft." Her jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that. You sold my house behind my back. You emptied my savings. You lied about everything. And when I asked for nothing but honesty, you gave me silence." She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. I couldn't tell if it was from anger or effort. "I thought I was helping," she said. "No. You thought I wouldn't notice, and then you thought I wouldn't do anything about it." A pause. Then, "Do you know how hard it is to juggle everything? The bills, the kids, Dad's investments, the market? You've never understood what it's like." I stared at her for a long time. "I raised 3 children while working double shifts. I paid for your college, your first car, your first mortgage. I took care of your father when he was dying and buried him without asking anyone for a dime." I stepped closer. "What you don't understand is that I chose to help. I was never obligated. I gave, and you mistook that for permission to take." She looked down. "You know what's worse than the theft?" I said. "You didn't even have the decency to be ashamed." "I am ashamed," she snapped. "No," I said. "You're exposed. It's not the same thing." She blinked again, furious now, but floundering. "So that's it? You're cutting me off? Your own daughter?" I didn't answer right away. I looked past her toward the street. A woman across the way was watering her front garden. 2 boys rode past on bicycles, their laughter carried by the wind. Life, small, simple, was still going on. "Yes," I said at last. "I am." Catherine opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "Emma is still welcome," I added. "But you are not entitled to my name, my money, or my forgiveness." I turned and walked back inside, shutting the door gently behind me. No slamming, no yelling, just done. That night, the house was still. I brewed tea, lit a single candle, and sat in the living room with the windows open. The summer air drifted in, warm, humid, scented faintly with cut grass. I thought of Walter. What would he say, seeing all this? Probably something simple, something quiet. You did what you had to. And I had. I wasn't bitter, not really. I was just done pretending that kindness buys loyalty, that love is a leash, that silence is safety. Some lessons come late, but they still count. The next morning, I changed the locks. Not because I thought she'd come back with a key, though she might have, but because I wanted to do it myself. I stood on the porch in the sunlight, screwdriver in hand, hands steady despite the ache in my knuckles. The metal clicked into place with a sound that felt final, like punctuation. When I stepped back inside and closed the door behind me, the latch sounded different. Cleaner, like the house could finally exhale. Glenn called just after lunch. "They've filed a formal countermotion," he said, "attempting to delay the hearing, claiming you're being manipulated, pressured by counsel." I smiled. Let them. He sighed. It's going to get more personal now, Helen. They're not going to argue facts. They're going to argue you, your memory, your state of mind, your reliability. Be ready for that. I've been underestimated before, I said. They can join the list. He chuckled, but it was tight at the edges. We'll get through it. We already are. That afternoon, I went through every drawer in the house, not out of paranoia, out of clarity. I wanted to see for myself what remained and what could go. Receipts, expired insurance cards, letters I hadn't opened. I filled 2 garbage bags and set them outside. Then I opened the drawer where I kept old birthday cards. There they were. Years and years of them. Love you, Mom. You're the best. Thanks for always being there. I kept reading them, one by one, until they blurred into something meaningless. The same tidy handwriting, the same cheerful tone. All the ways Catherine used to remind me I was needed. Not loved, needed. There's a difference. I burned them that evening. Out back, in the old metal bin Walter used for weeds. The paper curled and turned black in seconds. I watched the smoke drift upward, light as a thread, then disappear. No tears, no regrets, just space. 2 days later, Emma came by. She brought a folder with her, one I hadn't expected. I talked to a friend in my ethics class, she said. He helps with a community clinic that does free forensic accounting for elder cases. He offered to look at everything, no charge. She slid the folder toward me. Inside was a preliminary report. Every transfer Catherine made, every account she touched, every transaction marked by timing and method. Even the broker who facilitated the Tahoe deal had been named. Emma didn't say anything as I read. When I finished, I looked at her. You didn't have to do this. I know, she said, but I wanted to. And there it was. Not a gesture for approval, not a bid for praise. Just a quiet offering. A bridge between what had been broken and what might still be built. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned on the counter like she used to when she was little, watching me cook. What happens now? She asked. We wait for the court date, I said. And I live my life until then. She nodded. Do you want me to come with you? To the hearing. She nodded again. I looked at her. Taller than Catherine ever was, with her father's serious eyes and none of her mother's performance. I'd like that, I said. That night, I slept. Really slept. Not the shallow twitching kind I'd known for weeks, but the deep, dark kind that comes when your body knows it no longer needs to stay alert for betrayal. I dreamt of nothing. And when I woke, the house was still. Not heavy, just still. The clock in the hallway ticked gently. The sun made its usual path across the wood floor. And I stood in my kitchen with both feet firmly on the ground, knowing exactly where I was. Not lost, not broken, just home. The hearing was set for a Thursday. Not a dramatic day, not a date that meant anything. Just a spot on a crowded docket at the county courthouse where too many families drag their secrets into the light and try to dress them in legal language. I wore navy. The same suit I wore to Walter's memorial. Simple, clean, no frills. I didn't want to look fragile. I wanted to look like what I was. Alert, prepared, unmovable. Emma met me on the courthouse steps. She didn't say much, just offered her arm. I took it, grateful not because I needed the help, but because it reminded me that not all blood runs cold. Inside, the courtroom was cold, half empty, too bright. Catherine sat with her attorney 2 rows ahead of us. She turned once, eyes flicking over me like I was someone she vaguely recognized. I looked right at her. She didn't hold the gaze. The judge was younger than I expected. Late 40s, maybe. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. She opened with pleasantries. A brief outline of the case, the motion, the counter-motion, then asked Catherine's lawyer to speak. And speak she did. She painted Catherine as a devoted daughter, sole caregiver, primary financial organizer, and deeply concerned family member. She used the phrase mental fatigue more than once and implied, gently but deliberately, that I had perhaps misunderstood the financial decisions made on my behalf. I didn't flinch. Glenn rose when she finished. His tone was dry, precise, a scalpel. He presented the forensic report, the shell companies, the brokerage accounts, the timeline, the documentation, each piece layered until the picture was unmistakable. This was not care, he said. It was calculation. Then the judge turned to me. Mrs. Johnson, would you like to speak? I stood. My knees didn't shake. I'm 78 years old, I said. And yes, I forget things sometimes. I lose words, burn toast, get tired walking up the stairs. But I did not forget who owns my name. I did not forget who paid for the roof over my head. I did not forget that trust is not something you use. It's something you honor. I paused. The room was quiet. Not courtroom quiet. Human quiet. I gave my daughter power because I believed she would protect me. She used it to erase me. She took what she could and hoped I wouldn't notice. And when I did, she told me I was confused. I looked directly at Catherine. I'm not confused. The judge nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. And that was that. We didn't wait for the ruling. Glenn said we'd be notified by mail within the week. As Emma and I stepped back outside into the blinding sun, I breathed easier than I had in months. Proud of you, she said. Not proud, I replied. Just done being quiet. She drove me home. We didn't speak much, just soft music on the radio, the kind Walter used to hum along to when he was fixing the car. When we pulled into the driveway, Emma leaned her head back against the seat. She looked shaken, she said. She's not shaken, I replied. She's embarrassed. There's a difference. Will she ever say she's sorry? I looked out the window at the tree Walter planted when Catherine was born. It was taller now than the house itself. If she does, I said, it'll be for her sake, not mine. That evening, I lit a candle on the porch. Not for any ritual, just because I liked the way it glowed against the dusk. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine, the kind Rosa planted 2 summers ago. The neighborhood was quiet. Even the birds had gone still. And I thought about all the things I'd let slide over the years. The sharp comments passed off as jokes. The forgotten birthdays. The expectations disguised as gratitude. All of it had piled up like dust in corners I stopped noticing. But now I saw it all. And I wasn't angry. I was simply awake. The hearing hadn't given me back the house or the money or the years of slow erasure. But it had given me something else. Something I hadn't realized I'd lost. My voice. Not the one I used in pleasantries. Not the one that made things easier at Thanksgiving. Not the one that reassured everyone I was fine. The real one. The one that said, "This is mine, and you don't get to touch it." The official ruling arrived in a plain envelope with no ceremony, no warning. Glenn had called earlier in the week and said we should expect it soon. It'll be formal, direct, probably underwhelming considering what it means. He was right. It came on a Friday, just past noon. I'd just taken a pie out of the oven. Peach, because that's what Walter always asked for in September. And the house smelled like sugar and memory. I set the envelope on the counter beside the cooling rack and stared at it for a full minute before opening it. The language was dry. Words like plaintiff, revocation sustained, fiduciary breach, nothing personal, nothing emotional, just confirmation that the court had ruled in my favor. Catherine's power of attorney was not just voided, it was deemed abusive in application. The judge cited evidence of intentional misappropriation of funds, disregard for fiduciary duty, and a pattern of deceptive behavior. She wrote, "The court finds sufficient cause to not only uphold the revocation of authority, but to recommend that the matter be reviewed for potential civil restitution proceedings." In other words, they may have to pay, not just apologize, not just make amends in name only, but return what they took. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in the black folder marked Estate. Active. Not to forget it. To remember it. In case anyone, someday, tried to say it hadn't happened. Glenn called that evening. He didn't ask how I felt. "Next step," he said, "is to pursue recovery, if you want it." "I do," I said. "Good. I'll start the paperwork." He hesitated before hanging up. "You were calm in there, at the hearing, steady." "I've had practice," I said. He chuckled. "I believe you." That weekend, I finally cleared out the last room upstairs, the one we used to call the sewing room, even though I hadn't threaded a needle in years. It had become storage, old photo albums, bags of winter coats no one wore, a bin full of Catherine's childhood trophies and drawings she never came back for. I opened it one last time. A watercolor from second grade. My mommy and me, stick figures with giant smiles. Underneath, in careful little letters, she makes the best toast and never yells. I set it aside. Next, a ribbon from a spelling bee. I remembered the word she'd won with, duplicity. The irony still made me smile, not bitterly, just knowingly. At the bottom of the box, I found a birthday card from years ago, one I hadn't seen before. Maybe it had fallen. Maybe I'd put it away in a rush. It said, "I don't say this enough, but I admire you. Everything you've done for this family. I hope one day I'm half the woman you are." It wasn't signed. But I recognized the handwriting. Catherine's. I didn't cry. I just folded the card and placed it on the top shelf, behind a small stack of Emma's old books. Not everything needs to be destroyed. Some things are just meant to be left behind. On Sunday, I walked down to the church for the first time in months. Not for a sermon, just to sit. The doors were open, and the late light slanted across the pews like spilled honey. I sat in the fourth row, where Walter and I used to sit. He liked being close enough to hear, but far enough to leave early without causing a stir. I didn't pray. I didn't ask for anything. I just sat in the quiet and let my breath settle. That's what no one tells you about grief. It doesn't just follow death. It follows betrayal, the end of trust, the loss of illusions you clung to for decades. But it also makes room for new choices, new boundaries, new peace. When I got home, Emma was waiting on the porch. She stood when she saw me, hands in the pockets of her jacket. "Court letter came," I said. She nodded. I figured. They ruled in my favor. Her face broke into relief. "Good." "That's good." I sat beside her. "She won't stop," Emma said after a moment. "Even if the court said no, she'll twist it, make herself the victim, try to make me choose again. You already chose, I said. She looked down. What if I want to forgive her someday? Then do, I said. Forgiveness is yours to give. But access, that's earned. And you don't owe anyone a second chance at your boundary. She looked at me for a long time. You don't hate her, she said. It wasn't a question. No, I said. I just finally believe her. That's the thing about betrayal. It's not the lie that breaks you. It's the moment you realize the lie wasn't an accident. Catherine had made her choices. Now I was making mine. And mine came with peace. By the time fall settled in for good, the neighborhood had changed. The lawns weren't as sharp, the leaves had begun to gather along the curbs, and the morning air carried that faint scent of wood smoke and far-off rain. Rosa next door put out her ceramic pumpkins. The mailman started wearing gloves, and I, for the first time in years, didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder when I checked the mail. Peace doesn't come all at once. It arrives in small things. A quiet kettle, an unopened voicemail, a door that no longer sticks. The restitution hearing was scheduled, but Catherine's side offered a settlement before it came to that. Not out of guilt, out of strategy. Glenn reviewed the proposal, adjusted it, and sent it back with a number that was fair, not kind. They accepted within 48 hours. A formal apology was attached, not from Catherine, but from her lawyer. Empty phrases like unfortunate misunderstanding, family complexities, regret for the distress caused. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The money was wired back into an account under my name only. The Tahoe property was sold. The broker who'd helped them move the funds was quietly investigated for negligence. And just like that, the house Catherine tried to erase from under me was mine again. Not the walls, but the right to decide. It was never about the bricks. It was about the boundary. Emma came by to help me clean out the attic. I can't believe how many Christmas boxes you have, she said, brushing cobwebs from a tin labeled 1986. Your mother used to ask why I kept everything, I said. Emma smiled. She didn't get it, did she? No, but that's not really the point. I kept it for me. We worked side by side for hours, sorting, folding, reminiscing. At one point, she pulled out an old Polaroid, her as a toddler, sitting on Walter's shoulders, both of them laughing so hard their eyes were almost closed. I remember this, she whispered. That was the day he gave you a rock and told you it was magical. Her face softened. I kept that rock until I was 10. I nodded. He knew how to make you believe in things. Emma looked at me, serious now. You do too. I didn't reply. I just put the photo in the keep pile and kept going. Weeks passed. Catherine didn't call. Charles sent an email, short, stilted, asking if there was any path forward. I didn't answer. Emma did, though. She forwarded me what she wrote. You had a path. You lit it on fire. We're walking somewhere else now. I didn't tell her how proud that made me. I just made her tea the next time she came over and let her talk about school, boys, and the strange magic of finally choosing your own last name to put on an apartment lease. She didn't ask for advice. That's how I knew she was becoming someone strong. One night, I stood in the hallway and stared at the photo wall again. This time, I didn't turn anything face down. I simply added one more. A picture of me and Emma, taken last week on the porch. The light was golden. Her arm was around my shoulder. I wasn't smiling big, but I was smiling real. I looked content. Because I was. And now? Now I wake early and walk to the corner without my cane. I still forget things. A name, a date, what I walked into the kitchen for. But I no longer forget myself. I'm not just a mother, not just a widow, not just a name on a form someone else thought they could sign. I'm Helen Johnson, and I didn't take my power back. I remembered I never gave it away. If you're still reading, thank you. If this felt like your story, or your mother's, or your grandmother's, share it. Let someone know we're not as fragile as they think. We know what silence costs, and we also know how to speak when it matters.